lesson, we are going to be working with percents in proportions. We were previously doing proportions, no percents in them, so this is going to seem very familiar to you. All right, so our goal is to create a proportion where one of the ratios is a percent out of 100. And this first example, I get it. You can mentally solve this problem. You've already solved it mentally and you moved on. I intentionally made the problem easy so that you could intuitively follow along and the problem would make sense to you. But we're going to go ahead and show you how to set it up so that when the problem gets harder, you'll be prepared for that as well. All right, if 50% of people are girls, how many girls are there in a room of 250 people? Okay, so for most of our percents, we're really going to have a part and a whole because we're dealing with something out of 100. And really, again, if you've forgotten, that's what percent means. Per meaning kind of out of, and cent meaning 100, like century or cents, there's 100 cents in a dollar. Okay, so 50%, that is part, and we could have even maybe recalled this instead of ratio 1, our percent. And, well, what's the whole? This part is always given to you. We're always, for percents, dealing with 100. So that should make setting these up a little bit easier than some of our other proportions. So that's going to be 100 there. Now we have the number 250. Is that a part or a whole? And that's really kind of the big question that we have to answer in a lot of these. Is the other number going to be a part or a whole? So in the room, in the class, in the whole group, that's going to be our whole, and so we're looking for x here. Okay, so we convert that over to a proportion. And you can solve this using cross products or scale factors. I'm going to use a vertical scale factor of 1/2. We're always multiplying, that's why it's 1/2. So 250 times 1/2 means that x is 125. 125 girls in the room. Excellent. Okay, let's try another one. In example 2, it says, if 30% of the class watches TV last night, and we know that there are 6 TV watchers, then how many people are in the class? Okay, so let's fill in the titles ourselves. We've really got part, we've got whole, we've got a percent here, and we've really got TV watchers / people. Okay, so they told us that 30% of the class, so that is our part. And again, what's our whole for our percent? 100. That should be nice. It should be a nice way to get, these should be easier than some of our other problems because you already know part of the information. It's always going to be 100 there for our percent. Okay, so then where does the 6 go? 6 TV watchers. Is that the whole? Is that the part? So you might kind of gather that from the fact that it says 30% of the class watches TV and 6% are TV watchers. So that kind of shows that they are kind of matching up together. You might also kind of look at the question that says how many people are in the class. So if that's what the question is, that might confirm to you that we don't know the whole and that this is the part. All right, so there's our table filled out. So let's convert that to a proportion. So 30 over 100 equals 6 over x. Now, you could use a scale factor for this, but it is kind of a repeating decimal. If you go to decimals, I wouldn't recommend using that. If you want to use it as a fraction, like a vertical scale factor of 3/10 or 10/3 going down, you could do that. Usually when they get messy enough like this, I'm going to go ahead and think about going and using cross products. I mean, you can use a horizontal scale factor of 1/5 as well, but it's up to you about how you want to do that. So if you want to do it with cross products, 30x, this diagonal, is equal to 600. And then you can go ahead and divide both sides by 30 to get that x is equal to 20. So there were 20 people in class. All right, third example. By counting the hands in the air, the teacher saw that 5 out of 30 students still had questions about the lesson. All right, so let's start filling out our labels. So again, we're kind of dealing with a part and a whole. And here we've got our percent. And this time we're talking about really hands and maybe kids in the class. All right, so, well, what's the percent? Reading through the question again, we see that they didn't give us that. And I look at the question, what percent? So you might right away recognize that that's going to be our variable. But we're still a percent, so we're still out of 100, so that's going to go in there for our whole. And then we've got 5 out of 30. Hopefully that's pretty clear that that's 5 as the part, 30 as the whole. All right, we've got our proportion ready to go. All right, so once again, you might see here's a situation where there's not like a great scale factor. You could use a vertical scale factor of 1/6. And if you use exactly 1/6, that's fine, but don't use that as the decimal because the repeating decimal will mess up your answer because of the rounding. I'm just going to go ahead and do cross products. 30x is equal to 500, and divide both sides by 30 to get that x is equal to 16. And you could put 0.6 repeating. I'm going to go ahead and write that as a fraction, 16 2/3%. So that's our percentage of the class that still have questions. So 16 2/3% still have questions. Excellent. All right, let's look at the next example. Yeah, something happened with the numbers here. I think I cut some examples. So that is, of course, example 4. David earned 220 out of 210 points. What percent did he earn? Okay, so let's go ahead and label things. Part, whole, percent, and points are the other thing in here. All right, this might make you feel uncomfortable because he earned 220 out of 210 points. He must have earned some bonus points. That's okay. Let's just go ahead and fill that. The out of would be a key kind of words there to tell you that that is going to be our whole. Okay, so our whole for points is 210. Our whole for percent is 100. So where does the 220 go? The 220 is points, so it should go in the points column. We don't know the percent once again. All right, so turn that into our proportion. X over 100 equals 220 over 210. Again, scale factors are pretty messy at this point, so let's multiply our cross products. 210x is equal to 220, tack on 2 new zeros for multiplying by 100. Okay, let's divide by 210 on both sides, and we get that x is equal to, I'm just going to go ahead and convert this to a decimal since we often talk about grades that way, 104.8. So David earned 104.8%. Pretty good grade, David. Okay, let me just recap the four problems that we have on this page because they show something different each time. This one is showing the fact that percents can be greater than 100 even though they're out of 100. Number 3 shows that sometimes our variable is the percent part that we don't know. 2 show that sometimes our variable is the whole we don't know. And sometimes it is the part of the item that we don't know. So those are really 4 different examples of what you might see in our proportion problems. Now, sometimes you'll see very generic looking problems. Things that will say 15 is what percent of 30? Well, the key to remembering how to do that is to focus on the fact that is your part, okay? And of is your whole. What do we mean by that? So if we go and pick apart this problem, and we're looking for the part, 15 is right there. That's telling you that's going to be our part. And of 30 is telling you that's going to be our whole. So that should help fill in your table for you. Okay, so we've got part, we've got whole, we've got percent, and we've got, items or objects or numbers in this case. We just call them numbers. All right, so let's fill in. We know 15 and 30. We know 100 is always our whole for percents. So we can put an X there. Again, I know this one's easy, but that's kind of the point to set you up so it makes sense so that the math is not a struggle for us, but the fact that we can all just focus on how we set things up. So a nice vertical scale factor of 1/2 works here. So X, of course, is 50. So 50%. Great. Let's try another one. Again, identifying what is the part and what is the whole. So it says 20% of 75 is what? So is what? Well, that's kind of telling you the is something that's missing. They told us of 75 is going to be our whole. So in this one, they also basically told us that the percent. They said 20%. So that should be clear that that's going to be our part for our percent. So part, whole, percent, number. So 20%. Our whole is 100, of course. We're of 75, and is what? That's what we're looking for. X. All right, 20 over 100 equals X over 75. Here we could use a vertical scale factor of 1/5. Great, and when we divide 75 by 5 or multiply by 1/5, we get X is equal to 15. All right, so 15 is our answer. So we'd say 15 is 20% of 75. Great. All right, example 7, let's pick apart what goes where first. They told us 120%. They said, of what? So that would kind of tell us that of what? We're talking about X as our whole there. And then is 80. So that's going to be our part there. So again, part, whole, percent, and our number. Okay, so we've got 100, of course, for our percent whole. 80 is our part, X is our whole. Here, they told us 120%. Okay, 120 over 100 equals 80 over X. We could look for a scale factor. I'm going to just make my life simpler and do 120x is equal to 8,000. Divide both sides by 120, and we get that X is equal to 66, and you should get 0.666, so I'm going to make that, well, we'll just write that with our repeating decimal. You could also write that as 66 and 2/3. Either one of those is fine here. So that's the missing number here. All right, so what number appears in every percent proportion problem? Well, 100, of course, because that's always going to be our whole for our percents. Can a percentage be greater than 100? Yes, we've seen that a couple of tims. Just because 100 is the whole doesn't mean you can't be greater than the whole. Sometimes you can be more than one whole. It says, if the part is greater than the whole, what is true about the percentage? Well, kind of answered that a second ago. It is greater than 100. Okay, so tomorrow we will be working on doing some actual problems with these, so make sure you have the notes ready for us tomorrow in class.